I thought Joel Hodgson was going to surprise us on mic. He's been here the whole time. This time we watched KTMA Episode 6, Gamera vs. Gaos.
Gamera the Flying Turtle is pretty neat, I must admit, but 3 years in a row is ridiculous.
Oh, but that one hit too close to home. But first, some fun facts left over from our last episode, Santa Claus Conquers the Martians.
Yes. Fun fact number 1. Because we got a lot of them. Santa Claus Conquers the Martians was the first time that Rob Schrab wrote for the series. He was a one-off guest writer then, but he would become co-director of all of season 12.
Yeah, and that was pretty neat. It's funny, I hastily added that to this episode because I had conveniently forgotten this fact by the time we recorded on Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. Schrab will be known, I guess, for his collaborations with Dan Harmon or his work on the Sarah Silverman Show, or for creating the comic book Scud the Disposable Assassin.
Okay, I've totally heard of that comic book.
Yeah.
What other fun facts do we have left over?
Well, one thing that neither of us really had time to peruse, but what is a joy to behold if you can get your mitts on it, is that Santa Claus Conquers the Martians is available. Well, let's just say it's a multimedia project.
They had ambitions with this one.
Mm-hmm. A whole expanded universe.
Yeah, because they made it into a comic book.
Yes, and it was done by Dell Comics, who did adaptations of all like the Universal monster movies. So there's a lot of collectible Dell Comics of that. And also Dell, I think, put out the very first Star Trek comics way back when.
Oh, so they're used to adapting things.
Mm-hmm. Especially junk.
So here's the thing. Now I have read the Santa Claus Conquers the Martians comic, and it's better than the movie.
Yes. I think a big part of it is the art. One, this story is way, way easier to digest when it's a mere, 30 pages.
Yes, yeah, that's absolutely part of it.
But also, I think the art helps. The art really helps because in the comic, all of the Martians, even though most of them bear a passing resemblance to the actors, the Martians are drawn in such a neutral, we only obey science kind of way, following the plot of the movie, that everyone is kind of raised to be a computer. They're educated until, basically they're educated until they can walk, and then they're expected to be adults from that point on in Martian society. Well, in the movie, you have all these kind of surly actors playing the Martians.
Yeah.
And so every scene is really tense, and the guy who plays Voldemort, or whatever the really mean guy's name is, the guy with the mustache, is so unnecessarily threatening. The guy who's playing the villain looks like he's going to murder those kids. He's too serious.
But he's the bad guy. How else are you supposed to act that?
Well, that's just it. When you read the comic, it's he just seems misguided. Instead of being I disapprove, it's just I don't agree with this line of action. We don't need to kidnap Santa Claus. He's just neutral. They're all neutral, and it makes way more sense. Also, Droppo bears way more of a resemblance to the Great Kazoo in the comic than he does in the movie.
So you're saying that the comic book has more nuance than the movie, despite being significantly shorter.
Yes, much like Batman, which we were talking about not that long ago with Santa Claus Conquers the Martians and Wild World of Batwoman. Perhaps the right thing to do is to stick with the comic, albeit in this case, not the source material.
There's also a read-along record.
Oh my God, yes.
Which is for the comic.
Yeah, I assumed... And until I listened to it, I didn't get corrected. I assumed, there must have been a read-along book for this, but no, it goes with the comic.
Yeah, with the narrator sort of describing the panels and everything, doing a pretty good job of it, I guess.
Not only that, but the experience of reading the comic and going with the read-along record that, thank God, somebody ripped and put online. Admittedly, you have to spend way less money on an audio production than a movie. But where the movie really falters, the audio production is actually pretty good. The actors are not the same, and they're doing weird vocal effects on the Martians to make them sound more alien. And for the most part, they're much better actors.
Well, something that I haven't been able to get my hands on is the novelization that happened much later, 41 years after the movie came out.
Please tell me this was also written by Alan Dean Foster.
I can't tell quite who it was written by. It was published along with the DVD copy of the movie, and apparently it's told from the point of view of Gurmar, which is to say Pia Zadora, or one of the Amazon reviewers says, perhaps by a crazy woman who thinks she's Gurmar after having seen the movie.
I find that relatable, yeah.
Yeah. Apparently Gurmar is sort of in on how silly it is.
Ah.
So that might be fun.
It sort of goes against the movie in a nice way, where it's very much a male-driven movie. You have your villains are male. The object of desire is male, Santa Claus. The solution to the problems is either credited to the boy that they abduct from Earth, who's said to be quite clever, or Droppo just becoming the new Santa Claus.
Yeah.
It's a world without women.
It's a super patriarchal society in Mars, and what a surprise. Well, so the other thing that I wanted to bring up, the other final fun fact about Santa Claus Conquers the Martian, unless we remember a few more and drop them in next episode, is that there's a really weird line. I didn't know what was going on until I started doing research for the episode last time, but I forgot to put it in anyways, whoopsie, which is that after Crow introduces Let's Have a Patrick Swayze Christmas, Joel says, Paul, let's have a Patrick Swayze Christmas. Mm-hmm. Did you ever know what that was referring to?
I looked it up.
Yeah.
But that's only it. It is a David Letterman thing.
It is his terrible impression of David Letterman.
Are you saying that Joel is no longer the man of 1,000 voices as we thought him to be?
Exactly. If you listen to it knowing the reference that he's making, that he's trying to do that, you can sort of hear it, but only just.
Mm-hmm. And there's so many flubs that were left in the show as part of the original run that it's easy to just take that as like, oh, maybe he was just talking to Paul Chaplin off camera.
Yeah. Well, I always assumed the actual name of the song was Paul, Let's Have a Patrick Swayze Christmas, which doesn't quite fit with the scene, but it's the only way to make that make sense if you can't recognize the softest impression ever done.
And also, like, what does it take to do a good David Letterman impression? I'm pretty sure it involves, like, grimacing, licking your top teeth, and going, hee hee, after saying something.
And Joel didn't put in the effort for that.
No.
All right. I guess that's enough of the Christmas wrap up. I guess we get to talk about our Gamuary celebratory movie episode, Gamera versus Gaos.
Ooh, let the Gaos begin.
This time we watched KTMA episode 6, Gamera versus Gaos. We start with a 4-minute montage of exciting scenes from later in the film. What? What sort of movie starts with a sort of trailer for the movie you're about to see? Well, a terribly edited and dubbed Sandy Frank version of a film, that's what. So, okay, there have been some earthquakes and volcanoes going off, including Mount Fuji. Gamera shows up at Mount Fuji attracted by the flames, and in a small farming community either right near or 150 kilometers away from Mount Fuji, the town's only boy, Eiichi, looks up at Gamera, friend to all children. Let's cover the subplot first. There's a company that's trying to put a road through the farming community, but the farmers don't want to sell. They go back and forth with the company, but by the end of the movie, everyone is satisfied. Eiichi's sister, one of the 2 women in the town, is excited because this will bring progress to the town, which is exactly how these things always work out. But our main plot involves Gaos. This massive pterodactyl-type monster has taken up residence in a mountain near the farming community, which is not Mount Fuji but Mount Futago, and he likes to shoot laser beams and generally be a nuisance. The humans and the Gamera take turns trying to rid the world of this pest, who, they figure out, is attracted to the great taste of human blood, but repelled by the sunlight. Hey, just like me. Gaos and I both shrivel up when exposed to sunlight. Anyway, Gamera saves the day. Hurrah! But not before giving a ride to Eiichi and watching Gaos destroy large parts of... Oh, hey, it's Nagoya this time, not Tokyo. Nice, switched up a little. The movie ends with a bunch of scenes pieced together from all the Gamera movies. Originally, in the actual movie, the credits ran over this, along with a jaunty song, but Sandy Frank treats us to more of the score from this movie and no obvious reason for this montage to be here. Sandy Frank, you're too good to us.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, Joel greets everyone to a brand new episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000 and encourages viewers to spread the word about the show. It's still Christmas time, and Crow is still frozen and decorated as a Christmas tree. See It's Just a Show episode 42 for details. Joel is happy that the Satellite of Love's phone line has lit up with so many callers already. Well, mostly happy. He does warn certain callers to stop leaving certain kinds of messages on their machine because they're upsetting Gypsy. And now, a very special old man corner. You see, kids, in the days before the internet, anonymous strangers vented their weird frustrations via phone lines and letters to newspaper editors. It wasn't great, but the limitations of the form meant that no one was making 10-hour videos about Star Wars movies and YouTubers they don't like. I'm Adam Clark, rocking in my old man chair and whittling a wooden spittoon for my heart's true love, and this has been Old Man Corner. Oh, right, the messages. Joel plays one from a fan of the show who offers some constructive criticism. Gamera's pretty neat, but 2 weeks of Gamera movies in a row is an awfully big bowl of turtle soup to swallow.
Gamera the Flying Turtle is pretty neat, I must admit, but 2 weeks in a row is a little ridiculous.
Joel agrees and places the blame on two mad scientists who've been piping in these movies from the get-go. And here we have MST3K's first retcon, as Joel stated in previous episodes that he was picking movies from the SOL's library. But hey, if that's the kind of thing that bothers you, maybe space comedies with a disregard for continuity like this and Red Dwarf simply aren't your cup of tea. After the historic moment with the introduction of the Mads in Segment 1, Segment 2 sees Servo going through robot puberty. For those who missed the first 5 episodes, and let's face it, we may never see the third KTMA episode, Servo's voice varied between a slow-witted Bullwinkle-type voice and a high-pitched Kermit-like chirp, as J. Elvis Weinstein was figuring out the character. Since Joel apparently finds his creation's voice, or voices, to be annoying, he tunes the gumball-headed robot's vocal cords. After a roundtable of impressions, we get a brand new Servo who sounds like a slightly exaggerated version of Weinstein's own speaking voice. Feeling like a new man, Servo christens himself Tom. Gypsy requests a voice upgrade in Segment 3, but Joel declines, citing that she has a deep and sexy voice like Betty Davis Eyes singer Kim Carnes. Don't worry, Gypsy, every robot's voice changes at least twice on this show, and your time will come. We also get another phone message from the Joel hotline, where the caller requests that Crow be unfrozen and suggests Gypsy join the boys in the theater from now on. We then get a repeat of the Crow gets frozen scene shown last episode. Joel promises that Crow will thaw just in time for the MST3K New Year's special, which will air after the famous KTMA melon drop. Joel is disappointed to find Gypsy has been eating the garland on the Crowsmas tree, which she calls shiny spaghetti. Apparently, this is not a first-time occurrence. A young caller's messages are played in Segment 4, and it's pretty sweet, actually. A little boy invites Joel and the bots to his birthday party. Since they can't make it, Joel sets up a happy birthday banner on the SOL, and Tom Servo, wearing a party hat, offers the boys some sage advice like, walk briskly to and from your job, and fill your head with candy. In the final segment, Joel informs viewers that they'll be off for Christmas and returning for a New Year's Eve special, while Tom wishes everyone farewell.
Adam, did you ever call into a TV show or write into one, I suppose?
No, the closest thing I could think of is there was a phone number that was set up for a video game.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't one of those helplines. That made sense. There were all sorts of like gaming tip hotlines. These were usually 900 numbers.
Did you call a sex line to chat with Princess Peach?
I think I would be less embarrassed to tell my parents that I called a sex line than I was looking for tips on how to beat Who Framed Roger Rabbit for the NES. Now, what happened is that somewhere around the Super Nintendo era, there was a big push for a game that was alternately called Alfred Chicken or Super Alfred Chicken.
Okay.
And there was a phone number. It's like 1-800-ALFRED-C. I still remember it. 1-800-ALFRED-C. How can you forget? And I called it on a whim. And of course, it was toll free. And there was There was just some guy doing a falsetto voice. It was a recording going, "Hello, yes, it's Alfred Chicken. That's me, Buck Buck. I'm going to be the biggest star on the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo. Just you wait. Please buy Alfred Chicken." And he was just shilling the product and doing a falsetto voice for 2.5 minutes.
So you called an ad.
Yes. And one thing, let me tell you, having played Super Alfred Chicken shortly after calling, so I guess it did work. Wow, that phone message was way more entertaining than the ad. Now, I haven't double-checked this, but I recall that somebody had a recording of one of the Alfred Chicken voice messages. Apparently, they rotated and swapped out a few.
Sure.
And somebody put it up on like their Bandcamp or something. So if that still exists, we'll put a link in our show notes. But this raises the question, Chris. Did you ever call any TV shows? Were you tempted to call into the Ghostbusters hotline because there was a real phone number in Ghostbusters that you could call and you'd get a message from like Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis and Bill Murray and such?
I never called in, but I did write into a TV show.
Oh.
And this would have been back when MST3K was still fairly young. And it was on the Comedy Channel, I guess, before
Higgins Boys and Gruber?
No.
Did you
Night
write
After...
into Higgins Boys?
I could have, but no, I wrote in with To Night After Night with Alan Havey.
I knew it. That was going to be my second guess.
Which was a show that I absolutely adored and watched religiously. And I just wrote in to say, good work. I mentioned that my birthday was coming up, hoping for a shout out on the show, which he did not give.
Aww.
But yeah, that was all. I just wrote into him and got no response. And so have never written into another show since.
God, I can't. The closest thing I've come to that for like writing into a TV show is there was a plot point. I guess it's kind of fitting because, what do these monsters do in these movies but wrestle? Uh-huh. There was a plot point in the WWF wrestling TV program, which aired on Saturday afternoons.
Back when it was WWF.
Yes. I was talking about the World Wildlife Federation. It was a couple pandas fighting.
Pandas wrestling is always the best.
Yeah. And there was a plot line in which a wrestler named Earthquake,
appropriate again for today's movie.
Mm-hmm. A wrestler named Earthquake was the nemesis of Hulk Hogan. And Hulk Hogan had a sidekick named Tugboat. And his whole thing was Tugboat was a little portly guy.
Okay.
And his little portly guy would say, like, "I'm the Tugboat, toot toot." And that's kind of all that he did.
That's enough.
But Tugboat was a turncoat. Yes. And he did a heel turn. He became Typhoon. They both wrestled Hulk Hogan and Earthquake, who, as an overweight, balding man, but was still with a lot of curly hair for what little was left on his dome, who basically looks like all of my uncles combined. He put Hulk Hogan in a coma. That was the plot line.
Right. I remember that.
Yeah. So I wrote to Hulk Hogan saying, "Get well soon. I'm going to say my prayers and eat my vitamins." But inexplicably, and I still remember this because I remember coloring it, I drew Hulk Hogan, but I didn't draw Hulk Hogan victorious. I didn't draw Hulk Hogan with his rock and wrestling team with such characters as Rowdy Roddy Piper and the Ultimate Warrior. No. I drew Hulk Hogan in a coma.
All of which is to say that this is a very difficult episode to watch.
And talk about. Yeah. We had a bit of a stumbling block here. So something really cool has happened in more recent years, because if you were watching the KTMAs back when they were first becoming available online, like outside of tape trading, then you would have seen like encodes of all of the VHS tapes that were available. In more recent years, people have found cleaner sources, the best possible sources they could find, re-encoded them to a higher quality, and that's what we've largely been watching for this show. So largely, the episodes have been in decent quality, but this one, clearly nobody found a better copy of it because it's still in miserable shape.
Oh, it's so bad.
Yeah, there's a part where the tape actually has been chewed up. So the image starts flipping, at least in the copy I watched, the image starts flipping and then there was static. I expected it's oh no, the rest of this file is an episode of Cheers, isn't it?
I don't remember that in the version that I saw, but the version that I saw did have a few seconds missing when they tried to cut out the commercials, but didn't come back in time to catch the very opening of one of the host segments.
Oh.
But didn't lose that much. It was fine. But yeah, nevertheless, it's a muddy print. of a badly edited film with a terrible dub that is then on a terrible VHS tape. And it's just dreadful, which is unfortunate because, Josh in particular, but Josh and Joel are in the theater and they're making a good amount of jokes for an early KTMA episode.
They've got some goofs, and it's like I mentioned earlier in my summary, like it's a historic moment because this is the big change for Tom Servo. He officially becomes Tom Servo, and that seems to have brought out a bit of the devil in J. Elvis Weinstein because he is like constantly interrupting once his voice changes.
Yeah, it gave him something to work with. Yeah.
And like he's clearly trying stuff out, and it's cool to watch because what's weird, even more than the other KTMA episodes we've talked about on this show, this is like watching a rehearsal. And there's a real sense of like, what can we do? And so on the one hand, I would say for a number of reasons, like this is a hard one to watch. I'd skip this one if I was ye. If you are not watching this show for a podcast purpose, you can definitely skip this one. I'm sure someone has made the Tom Servo robot puberty sketch available on YouTube, and that's the easiest and best way to watch it. But it's also like this isn't one of the stronger riffs like we had with Cosmic Princess, which was like genuinely like pretty funny, and even Time of the Apes I thought had a lot of moments, but this one's a little more lacking. It's KTMA, so there's still like some fun stuff and a lot of like just weird, what are we even doing kind of energy to it.
I did later check out the original movie, the unriffed version of the movie. And it turns out it's much better.
No, surprise.
Surprise. But it's also much prettier.
Yeah.
Like the colors are lovely. And also, like it's a very widescreen film. And so this pan and scan kind of cropping takes out about half the movie.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why it's so hard to follow is that you very often don't get to see the whole screen. And there's a lot of important information that's been cut off. And like, I know it's sort of old and obvious to complain about this sort of thing, but that's one of the reasons why the movie makes so little sense. Not only is it a kind of poor quality dubbing, and not only is it the image quality is really bad, but like you don't even have all the information on the screen and you don't have the composition. It's hard to follow because the composition is wrecked, whereas the composition of the film is so important to how you understand what's going on.
Yes, I didn't watch the proper remastered print of Gamera versus Gaos in either a dubbed or subtitled form, but I did see some clips from it doing some research for the show, and I was blown away by how nice it looked.
Yeah.
And seeing clips from the other Yuasa movies, as he did a number of the Gamera sequels in the original Gamera film, I was really impressed by how they looked. They were really colorful, and it actually made the movie, just watching the clips, make a bit more sense, because seeing the full footage and seeing the kind of atmosphere that was being created in terms of cinematography and lighting is that this, what must have seemed so strange and so like tonally confusing to the MST3K writers of like, wait, who is this movie for? Like, there's a lot of scenes of adults and there's like monsters and it's getting bloody and blah blah blah. Is this and the Godzilla movies are definitely more aimed at an adult audience, at least at different points of the Godzilla movies run. So it's like, is Gamera like those, or is Gamera's largely focused on kids, and he like loves kids for some reason. And when you watch the widescreen version, even that just conveys the information of like, oh yeah, don't take this too seriously. This is a children's fantasy. It's like, it's stylized. Yeah. And that really gets lost in both the downgrade in quality and the panning and scanning. In this case, it's just scan and there's no pan because the camera never awkwardly zooms over to fill in the rest of the shot like in early 90s pan and scans.
So I'm told that this is the first movie in which our testatudinal hero bleeds.
Yes, thus inspiring the hit Kiss song, Only Turtles Bleed.
So I was curious. I hope you have an answer for me, because you are much more of a specialist on these sorts of things than I am. But like behind the scenes, how do they do that? Like, do they just have lots and lots of Gamera costumes and models and so forth ready? Or do they make special ones that are just there for the bleeding and that they can then toss away? Or like, because there was a lot of that. Also, Gaos loses a foot and then it grows back in this really weird scene. So, like, how do they do?
Well, the key thing here, at least for Gamera's sequences, I know the tricks of the trade as far as Godzilla movies go, and I assume it's the exact same practice. Because remember, this is the third Gamera movie.
Right.
So, in a later Godzilla movie, because that's one of the things, interestingly enough, that separates Godzilla and Gamera, which is that, especially in the 60s, the monster fights were bloodless for Godzilla movies. And Gamera was noticeably like a little bit different. You would get gore after a certain point, starting, I believe, here. And what they did when they finally had some bloodletting in a Godzilla movie, and I think the first Godzilla movie to do so was 1972's Godzilla vs. Gigan. What they did was they used a suit that was falling apart for action sequences. So they had a stunt suit by virtue of having made other movies. So it's like, because they would have to make a brand new suit each time because latex is what it is, rubber is what it is. These things rot and degrade. And if you keep reusing it, as they had to do on cheaper monster movies, it would start noticeably falling apart. So they would reuse older suits as basically stunt suits in sequences like these. So I imagine that for Gamera, they would have used either one of the suits from Gamera or Gamera versus Baragon, and had a special part where they could separate, because of course one of Gamera's legs gets severed, and they filled that up with tubes, and the tubes were attached to a squib full of green goo that's supposed to be Gamera blood, and they pump out all the blood. As for Gaos, I'm trying to think. And so correct me if I'm wrong here. Do we get shots of footless Gaos in flight, or do we only see the loss of foot in close-up and then the regrowth of the foot in close-up?
I believe we only get to see them in close-up. I believe it gets cut off when he's in the water.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing him fly away, although I guess I should double-check that. And then you see him standing in the cave when they're talking about how he might be able to regrow it. I get, if I remember. And then, you see the new foot push through the
Which is a really neat effect.
It's a very good and very creepy effect.
Yeah. Yeah, it gives Gamera versus Gaos its grit.
Yes.
With Gaos, this would have come with pre-planning. So there's a couple of things, and let's assume that there is a wide shot that is missing from the Rift movie, or we're just forgetting. It's very possible. You and I have turtle tunnel vision, as we were talking about a bit off pod. So I imagine that for Gaos, where they're not doing the Gamera stunt suit thing, for Gaos, they probably built the suit with that in mind. It's like, it says in the script that, he's got to lose an appendage. So they either could have created a full suit and a stunt suit, or they created the suit with removable booties, like cute little pajamas, that they could take off. And the performer would just have to essentially hide his foot into the abdomen of the creature. I don't know exactly what they did for Gamera versus Gaos, because finding a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff on Gamera movies is, as it turns out, kids, way harder than finding good resources on what happened in the behind-the-scenes making of Godzilla movies.
Yes, I'm actually trying to check right now about the... You do see a full... Wait, hold on. Let's rewind the tape.
You, the listener, are here minute by minute as we uncover the truth behind Gaos.
Okay, Gamera's in the water. He's holding Gaos's leg. He's trying to hold him so that the sun will come in and destroy him. Gaos shoots his own leg off with his laser beam, and he is above the frame of the movie when it falls off, when it severs, and Gamera falls back down with the stump of a leg.
Yeah.
But it's one continuous shot, so it doesn't look like they switched it out or anything. It doesn't look like there was any stop motion, and there's lots of splashing water. So it looks like that must have been made to release somehow. And then we have a scene of, he's flying away, and it does look like he has a stump. Mm-hmm. It's hard to tell because it's a bit of a distant shot. But if they made one that was meant to have a releasable foot, then that makes sense. And then you get cute Gamera splashing around with the stump of a leg, and then the people find it, and they get smaller, which I don't know how they did. I mean, I assume they just had more than one. And then when he's in the cave and he's already restored his foot and one of his toesies, and then 2 more toesies poke out from the rest of the foot. So yeah, it looks like that was the idea.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I don't necessarily think of, when I think of the lavish visuals of a Gamera movie, I don't immediately go to Gaos. I don't immediately go to Gaos, but there's a lot of neat effects here that, again, seeing cleaner clips in more pristine releases of this particular movie, it's like, it really made me appreciate the artistry that went into Gamera versus Gaos.
Yeah, it's got some pretty shots and it's well constructed. Like, this is a more than serviceable film, even though later in the movie when the planes are attacking Gaos and he's slicing them up, they do reuse the same special effects shots of the same planes getting cut in with 20 frames of film in between the two same shots. It's amazingly bold reuse of shots.
Wow, there's one thing to be said about kaiju movies of the 60s and 70s. It's that you never know when shots will get reused. You just know that they will.
What's that thing?
I suppose you could call it a fountain.
Fountain?
Gaos is known to like human blood. The fountain will spray out a substance which resembles human blood, both in smell and in taste.
Goat blood.
We're hoping it's going to lure him to the pedestal.
Now, one of the things that Gaos loves more than most good boys and girls is human blood.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the ways the humans try to snag him at the end of the movie is by converting the top of a rotating restaurant, a 4-story tall rotating restaurant with glorious views of nothing in particular. They convert the top of that into a fountain, and they manage to construct realistic fake human blood, which they then have spouting like a mist, like a fine atomized mist out of this fountain. And then they get some planes and then they pull the mist to try to lure Gaos over to this with the hopes that he will, they're going to spin it round and round and make him dizzy so that he won't be able to get up until morning. And then the sun will come up and will destroy him. This does not happen.
Which, this would have been the perfect plot for if Dai or Toho ever did a Dracula movie.
Yes, indeed.
Which I assume would have been called Dracula versus Mecha Dracula. I love this plot development just because, how often do you see a movie and the climax of the film is, let's turn a revolving restaurant into a blood volcano?
Not enough. But this is sort of what I wanted to ask you about. Is the fountain of blood a common trope in horror movies?
In a sense. Typically, there is a cliche of when somebody bleeds, it is like summertime and you are hosing off the kids and like getting a pool ready and all this sort of stuff. Like blood, like people don't bleed and like blood falls out of their body because blood is, circulating through their body and there's no place for it to go. So it's just falling out of the, now hole in their body, now severed part of their body. It's like, no. It sprays out as if pressurized.
Right.
And this reached like its most surreal point that I can think of, as there is a very memorable sequence in the original Nightmare on Elm Street in which a young Johnny Depp is killed. And of course, now Chris, you know who Freddy Krueger is, do you not?
I vaguely know him, yes.
If you were to describe what weapon Freddy Krueger has that he always has with him, do you know what it is?
He's got like Wolverine claws, right?
Yeah, he's got finger knives. So he's got like a glove with blades on it.
Right.
Now, how do you think Johnny Depp dies in the original Nightmare on Elm Street? If you were to hazard a guess based on what Freddy Krueger looks like and what you can assume is his main weapon.
Decapitated by a skateboard.
That's very close if you were watching one of the Elm Street sequels. That's like not far off from what Freddy would do. If you have a good pun to follow that with, they would have definitely filmed it. But what happens is that Johnny Depp is watching a Miss America type pageant. I think there's even dialogue to suggest it's the Miss Nude America pageant.
Of course.
And he falls asleep watching that, breaking the one rule of the film, don't fall asleep. And an arm, even though Freddy Krueger exists in the dream world, we see Johnny Depp on his bed. An arm comes out from under Johnny Depp, pulls Johnny Depp, and Johnny Depp is pulled into his bed and suddenly there is a hole in his bed, like a cavernous hole, like the entry to the lodge, the Black Lodge in Twin Peaks. And after a moment, after the screams have settled and there's silence, that bed becomes a blood volcano.
Oh, of course.
And it just vomits out this geyser of blood that just, again, splooshes all over the ceiling and rains down everywhere. It's a magnificent effect. And the closest thing I've seen to that is 3 years later, not to be outdone, and a filmmaker who had a joking rivalry with Nightmare on Elm Street writer-director Wes Craven is, of course, Sam Raimi. And when Raimi made Evil Dead 2, I think we were talking about this not too long ago, there's a scene in which Bruce Campbell wrestles with his own possessed hand and does a lot of physical comedy where he does a backflip and all this stuff.
Yes.
He saws off his hand, and then when the hand is hiding behind a wall, it's kind of crawled through a mouse hole, and now it's like creeping through the walls. He is able to detect it with his super keen hearing and shoots his hand. We hear a little Mr. Bill like, "Oh no!" and a little tiny droplet of blood comes out, and our hero laughs. But that the blood keeps on coming, and it starts getting it starts getting thicker and thicker, and then we hear the rush of a waterfall as Bruce Campbell mugs towards the camera with a Wile E. Coyote-like "oh no" expression, and he just gets doused with black blood. And there's so much blood at that point, not only coming out of that hole, but other holes in the wall, that Bruce Campbell just starts slipping and sliding. That I'm trying to remember if that's in the movie or if that's one of the cut scenes, but nonetheless, he does get in the finished film a geyser of blood in his face.
Wow. The other fountains of blood that I know are from songs. I would be remiss if I didn't mention a certain Bjork song that has the line, "I'm a fountain of blood in the shape of a girl," which I'm not going to go into that at all. If we'd get letters if I didn't mention it.
Yes, we get letters from your husband.
In particular. But yes, it's a great song, Bachelorette, go check it out. But another song that I didn't know about until I was doing some research, there's a hymn called "There's a Fountain Filled with Blood." Now, the fountain filled with blood in this hymn is Jesus. It's a metaphor for Jesus. And the idea is that there's a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel, i.e. Jesus' veins, and sinners plunged beneath that flood lose all their guilty stains. It seems like a fairly graphic opening to a hymn, but yeah, fountain filled with blood, bringing you closer to Jesus.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for Gamera versus the Shallow 13. 13 fiery battles as some fun facts try to defeat today's movie, Gamera versus Gaos. Gao, Adam, Gao!
Though ousted from directorial duties on Gamera vs. Barugon, Noriaki Yuasa, who directed the original Gamera, was brought back for this film and all other sequels for the original Gamera series.
Now, don't take that as a huge victory for Yuasa. When the higher-budgeted, more adult-oriented Barugon proved to be a box office disappointment, the studio saddled Gaos with a lower budget, and since Yuasa had Gamera experience and was willing to work on a tight financial leash, he got the job.
Gamera is in full friend-to-children mode here. According to Yuasa, he initially understood that Gamera had a soft spot for children based on his protection of Kenny in the first film. The decision to go further in that direction, especially after the Kenny-free Gamera vs. Barugon, was partly dictated by letters the studio received from children who loved the giant turtle and appreciated that he was on their side.
The child focus was partly a reaction to Toho's kaiju films, which never had children as lead characters until 1969's Gamera-inspired Godzilla's Revenge. Yuasa objected to the many scenes in Toho films where adults pontificate about monsters or slowly uncover the plot. So the focus is on Eiichi, who discovers that Gaos is nocturnal, gives Gaos its name, has some kind of connection with Gamera, and acts as the voice of reason throughout the film. That only a child can really understand what's going on is meant to highlight the dreamlike and surreal nature of Yuasa's Gamera films.
Gaos has proven to be Gamera's most popular foe, appearing in this film as well as Gamera vs. Guiron, 1995's Gamera Guardian of the Universe, Gamera 3 Revenge of Iris, and 2006's Gamera the Brave. He also appeared in the final film of the original series, Super Monster Gamera, but only as stock footage.
And this is not the only movie in which Gaos loses his foot. Stay tuned for him to lose it again while battling the knife-headed monster Giron in Gamera vs. Giron when we cover it in the year 2022.
This marks the third episode in a row to feature a Gamera film, and for once, it's in the right order, as Gamera vs. Gaos is the third in the original Gamera series. The KTMA season flipped around the first two movies, Gamera and Gamera vs. Baragon, and will then skip over Gamera vs. Virus and Gamera vs. Jiger. Gamuary is ruined!
When Joel encourages viewers to tell their friends about the show, he sells it with a non sequitur.
Why not play a joke on your friends, call them up, ask them to watch the show. Your eyes won't believe what your hands have done.
It should come as no surprise that Joel cribbed this from a TV commercial, as that was the original slogan for the Spirograph. Link in the show notes.
As Joel is fixing Tom's voice in segment 2, the robot goes through an array of impressions before settling on Josh Weinstein's naturally mighty voice. They are, in order, the Chipmunks, Dr. Ruth Westheimer, Henry Kissinger, Louis Armstrong, Droopy the dog, or maybe it's Carol Channing, that's up for debate, Elmer Fudd, and Ethel Merman.
This sketch also marks the first time Servo christens himself as Tom. Partly out of excitement, and partly to annoy Joel, Tom Servo states his full name repeatedly in the theater, often getting shushed by Joel. Yes, you can be shushed while riffing in the KTMA era, because the early days of MST3K are just weird.
Speaking of voice changes, Gypsy requests that Joel give her a new voice later in the episode, but Joel declines. Ironically, Gypsy's voice would change the following season when J. Elvis Weinstein was replaced by Jim Mallon, who'd voiced the Richard Basehart-loving robot from 1989 to 1997.
This episode contains another very special moment. A caller complains about all the Gamera films. Joel points out that 2 Gamera films is ridiculous, but 3 is a film festival. And then Gypsy says,
Joel says when you have lemons, you make lemonade.
Right, we got to make the most of it up here anyway.
Apparently, Gypsy is a fan of the show.
Joel says when you got lemons, you make lemonade.
And what exciting things await KTMA viewers following MST3K? Let's listen to this week's post-show voiceover.
William Conrad narrates spectacular footage of the world's most frightening and devastating natural and man-made disasters in Catastrophe, next. Monday night, a paroled convict plots a one-man heist of a casino. John Cassavetes and Britt Eklund star in Machine Gun McCain, tomorrow's movie at 7. A week from tonight, a young black woman rises from the ghetto to fame and fortune, only to find it meaningless without the man she loves. Diana Ross and Billy D. Williams star in Mahogany, next Sunday on TV 23.
Oh, I can't wait to watch them. And that's time.
Today, my friend, you go through puberty.
Puberty, does that mean I'm going to start perspiring and growing hair in weird places?
No, it just means that I'm getting tired of your voice and it's time to change it, okay?
Adam, when you went through puberty, did you do a lot of impressions?
Strangely enough, yes. Because I was trying to fix my voice. Now, Chris, I don't know what it was like for you, but I'm tempted to ask. Did you have a sense of what your voice changing would be like? And did you try to change your voice unnaturally? Did you try to settle and create an adult voice for yourself in the hopes that it would stick?
Now, it was a long time ago when this happened. I think that I just tried to stop it from bouncing all around for a while. So I tried to pick something that I was doing and stick with it through sheer force of will, but not out of any desire that this should be my natural booming adult voice.
I tried very desperately because I thought to myself, it's like, oh, my voice could be anything. It could change into anything. I have no power. And of course, there's nothing worse than telling a young adolescent boy that they have no power. So I was like, well, what's the best voice that I can think of?
Jimmy Durante.
No. Even better. I settled on what was my favorite voice of my youth. And naturally, it was the dulcet tones that were music to my ears.
Oh, no.
Lorenzo music, to be precise.
Oh, okay. I really thought we were going to hit a Donald Pleasance there.
Nope. It was a bait and switch.
So you went for Garfield.
I did. I was really hoping that because, he just had this great laconic delivery, and everything about it sounded funny but mature to me. I was like, that's what an adult should sound like, and it's such an idiosyncratic voice. I would be blessed to have such tones.
Well, that's true.
But it never came to pass, and I got saddled with what I got now.
Oh, well. Speaking of voice changes, what do you think about Tom's new voice?
Well, I must say that given the Kermit voice that he was doing this episode and last episode, it's a huge improvement.
Yes. Yeah, I love Tom's new voice.
Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan. I think Like, that's the thing. Say what you will about Dr. Earhart, who, as we've seen even in like the few KTMAs we've done, Earhart is much funnier in KTMA and even in season 12 than he is in season 1.
Yes.
Where for whatever reason he decided to do a high-pitched cartoony voice for the character. And it's weird that he did that given that he went through the exact same thing with Tom, where like Tom had this duh kind of voice early on, then he had a Kermit voice, and now he just sounds like J. Elvis Weinstein, who has a fantastic voice. And think about it. I think J. Elvis Weinstein is like 17 here?
I think so.
Yeah. Can you imagine that ridiculous voice coming out of a little kid with a big head of hair?
I guess I can, but I assume that they wanted to differentiate between the characters a bit more when they got to the big leagues.
Yeah, and as great a mimic as Trace is, that came like naturally to him. Like Dr. Forrester and Crow sound different, and they always have. And with Josh, him doing kind of like a slightly more guttural version of his speaking voice as he's doing in KTMA for Earhart, must not have seemed like it was enough, or maybe someone gave him direction. I don't know, but here he's so good, and getting the freedom of using what is essentially just him speaking with his full diaphragm. That's all that it is. It's not really a character voice. It's his voice. But he has such a naturally funny delivery that it's wonderful. And he's clearly like jazzed to be like, oh, Servo is me. And he kind of figured out, it's like, oh, Tom Servo should sound like a radio DJ. So he should be like a little bit aggressive and a little bit oily. And he starts to get on Joel's nerves throughout the episode.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's totally a personality that goes with that voice. Mm-hmm. And he just is able to run with it. And Kevin Murphy continues along with that line when he takes over the voice in season 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And even later on with Baron Vaughn doing it in the seasons. Like everybody who does Tom Servo owes a debt to J. Elvis Weinstein or Josh Weinstein here. And it's so weird to think that it's like, oh, Tom's perfect about like 2 segments into this episode, the 6th episode ever. And yet so little of what we recognize as MST3K is there at this point.
Yeah. So I think there's just time for one more thing, and I feel like I've been doing it a bit. Do you have just one more thing to talk about this time?
As a matter of fact, I do, but this is going to be a bit of a crossover, Chris, because this one more thing is entering into a dark corner known as the Scorner. So what we have here is the score for Gamera versus Gaos. It might not sound to the human ear to be all that different from previous Gamera scores from the last 2 episodes that we covered.
And we did have a Scorner for the last episode, which was the first Gamera movie, because KTMA did these in a weird order.
Yes. And like these are very, very similar. And sure enough, it's the same guy. It's Tadashi Yamauchi, who scored the original Gamera. Doing Gamera versus Gaos. And it's a very, very similar sound.
And let me say that having watched most of the movie Unmisted, that it's actually a fairly lovely soundtrack.
Yeah.
With some really nice string playing, particularly in the scene where Eiichi is riding Gamera and then sort of is saved from Gamera when somebody goes up a Ferris wheel and then Gamera leans in to help him be able to get off. Like, it's weirdly sad music, but it is very lovely.
And that's something that I think that Yamauchi brought to these scores, is that he treated them overall with like a kind of seriousness and embellished that where appropriate. But at no point, when you're listening to those scores, are you like, oh, this is a silly kids film, and the music is constantly reassuring you, and specifically children, to go like, don't worry, this is entertaining and you're excited. Like, it's not a sugar rush kind of score.
It's not Santa Claus Conquers the Martians.
No, sir. So apologies to Milton DeLug. But the thing that's interesting is that now, Chris, what music, just to recap, what music do you hear at the very end of this movie watching the Sandy Frank cut that ends with that montage?
You hear some bit of the score of the movie that you've just heard. It's just more strings being, I guess, sad.
Yeah. And yet, we were deprived, Chris, because, and I have to word this very carefully, we were missing a Gamera song, but not the Gamera song.
I will say, one of the things that I left this episode feeling was that we are 3 deep into the Gamera, and we still don't have the Gamera song, which is the reason why Misties love Gamera.
Yes. You would think, but it turns out that the tropes and templates for the Gamera series took about as long to come together as Mystery Science Theater 3000 took to come together. Who knew?
Boy.
Because we do get a jaunty Gamera song, but it is not that great, like, Gamera, Gamera. It's not that at all.
No.
It's, in fact, it sounds like a sound-alike of that. It's as though they couldn't afford the as-yet non-existent Gamera March, and they hastily got a replacement. It's like when you watch the best of the Shaft movies, which is, of course, the second film in the series, Shaft's big score. There is a song that is telling you about a man named Shaft and how a man named Shaft is good for loving, and he's also a mean private eye.
Shut your mouth.
I'm just talking about Shaft's big score.
I can dig it.
But that song, for the second film, they didn't get Isaac Hayes back, and they perhaps could not afford to license the song from the original film because it blew up so much. I think Hayes won an Oscar for it. So you have that film's director, who was an accomplished musician in his own right, singing his own version of it with different lyrics that was just different enough that they could get away with it. And that's exactly what this is like. We'll play a clip if we can, because it does sound remarkably different, but like it's still, you can almost hear like a producer listening to this song and going like, and throwing this out and going like, no, give me a jauntier Gamera song.
Yeah, it's a pretty good song for songs at the end of the movie in a language I don't understand, but it is not what I came here for. I come to these Gamera episodes for the Gamera song, and it's been 3 episodes and it's not here yet. And what is wrong? I hope it's in the next one. Is it the next one, or is it only in the final one?
I think it's in both. Like, I think it becomes a theme song from that point on, but I honestly don't know.
It has to be. It has to be in the next one. It's all we're going to talk about for the next one.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you've ever gone on a turtle ride, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you. For as little as $1 per episode, you can help us research and record this show, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/62. It seems redundant to ask you what we're doing next time.
I don't know. What could it be? Are we finally doing Manos, do you think?
Due to popular fan request.
Nope. That's not what we're looking at. We are going to be looking at Season 3, Episode 8, a little movie called Gamera versus Gaos. Untitled Gaos game.
Given that Gamera hurt his foot, shouldn't it be called Gamera versus Gout?
Gamera versus Gout. Well, we get to watch it again.
Yay! It's funny. When we were talking
is it funny? This episode wasn't that funny.
In the sense that one can laugh at one's own hubris, because Chris, I championed the idea of Gamuary. I thought it was a brilliant idea. It's like, we're going to watch the KTMA version of an episode and the Comedy Central version of an episode. We'll make it a whole month-long thing. And you know what? Doing that 4 times was just dandy. But as we were entering as we were leaving our 5th and entering our 6th outing for Gamuary, Pappy's tired.
Dear listener, if you have any ideas for what we should talk about in the coming years that may be vaguely turtle related, because we sort of ran through all the turtle stuff last year.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of behind the scenes stuff about kaiju films in like the very first 2 that we did.
So, and now we're just sort of We're grasping at straws.
Because we've recorded now 5 hours about Gamera.
Yeah, but only 5 more hours to go. We're at the halfway point in our Gamera thought.
Oh, no. We flew too close to the sun in our revolving turtle shells.
So this is going to be the fun of the next episode, is hearing us desperately claw for content.
Now, don't be surprised if either A, there's a very long opening segment in which Chris and I just discuss what books we've read recently, or if we decide to scrap the episode and the elves who make music over at Theme Squad just release a concept album about turtles instead of us recording about this damn thing.
Oh, boy. Well, if you write the lyrics, maybe next time, maybe one of the Gamera versus Zigras can be the concept album.
And that is the most musical one of all, because I believe that one has Gamera playing the creature's back like a xylophone.
Oh, right. I think, is it that one, or is it the one good one?
Well, the best one is Guiron. But Guiron doesn't have spikes on his back.
Whether it's Guiron or Giron.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's like Gaos and Gaos. I always thought the creature's name in this movie rhymed with chaos.
No, in the Japanese, it's definitely Gaos. Mm-hmm. And in the dub, it's Gaos.
Yeah. It's weird. Who thought Sandy Frank would be able to get one right?
To be fair, Joel gets it completely wrong in this episode many times by calling it Gaos a few times. Mm-hmm. And of course, he's still calling the big monster Gameron.
Yes.
Which is, of course, the singular. Gamera is the plural, and there are many Gamera living within that one turtle. That's why he's so big. Hey, by the way, here's the thing I wanted to bring up.
Oh, sure.
At some point during this episode, Joel says,
I'm glad that all these monsters are on the same relative scale of each other, It's always a fair fight.
Mm-hmm. Which is very observant. What's up with that?
I guess because it's funny. In the Toho movies, they were always trying to come up with different monsters for Godzilla to fight. So the very first one he fights is a creature on all fours, not unlike Baragon, named Anguirus or Anguilas, who is a little bit smaller and stouter than Godzilla, but he's always on all fours anyway. He never stands up. And then you had Mothra, who dwarfed over Godzilla. That is not counting King Kong, which is the only time they had to make a monster on equal footing as Godzilla, because you had 2 IP holders who had to ensure that neither monster won. So, I mean, aside from that, the monsters for Godzilla vary, because you have Rodan, who's much smaller. You have Anguirus, who's a little bit smaller. You have Mothra, whose wingspan dwarfs Godzilla. Like Mothra in the original movie is huge. And of course, the most famous monster of all, the 3-headed dragon, King Ghidorah, who is much larger than all the other monsters. And yet with Gamera, it seems like, yes, Baragon is on all fours like Anguirus, but it seems to be more or less a fair fight between him and Gaos, and Guiron or Gurion or whatever is also the same length as Gamera, even though he's also on all fours. Maybe it's just luck of the draw. It's like in terms of stuntmen in Japan who are available, they were all about 6'2".
Well, I mean, yeah, the variance there is not going to be that much, but they still could have had an enemy for Gamera, which was tiny or massive. Didn't have to involve 2 men of about the same size wrestling. Anyway, we will be looking next at Comedy Central, Gamera versus Gaos. Gaos. Now, here's the thing we didn't mention. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of unfortunate comedy in this episode.
Oh, yes.
With some rude things about the Japanese names at the opening credits and so forth. And it's, not meant cruelly, but it's still not great.
Yeah. Two thoughts came to my mind, and I imagine it'd be common for a lot of viewers. That your first thought is oh yeah, it's the 80s.
Yeah.
But the other thing that you think similarly, it's oh wait, it's the 80s, and you're kind of grateful that it's not like that one John Hughes movie where there's a character named Long Duck Dong, and they're just constantly making fun of him, and they're playing that da 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 music whenever he's on screen.
That's true.
You're grateful it's not as racist as it could be.
Well, there you go. So the Comedy Central episode is not as bad as that, but it is worse than the KTMA episode.
Yes.
But until then,
it's Turtles all the way down from here.
And it's the powerful FM voice I've always dreamed of. Take it away, Theme Squad.
1-800-ALFRED-C. How can you forget?